Have you ever wondered why some of the world's most expensive and promising projects ended up being utterly useless? Sadly, there has been an increase of such projects over the years that have resulted in catastrophic failures and huge financial losses. Find out which Chinese building complex had buildings tilting at precarious angles while we take a quick trip to Ukraine and see the iconic nuclear plant that's still dangerous today. Keep watching to learn all about the bridge that collapsed only a few months after their opening. At the end, we'll uncover the most catastrophic engineering failure in the history of New Jersey that cost a staggering $138 million. Almost everyone knows about the disastrous fail that was Chernobyl nuclear power plant. But do you really know what happened? Do you know how it all crumbled and became arguably the most infamous construction fail of all time? In 1986, a catastrophic explosion occurred at a plant in Ukraine, causing the release of colossal amounts of radioactive materials into the atmosphere. It claimed the lives of 2 brave workers initially, with the death toll later surging to 31. It also caused the evacuation of an entire city and affected the health of thousands of people. The repercussions of the Chernobyl disaster were felt worldwide, and the cleanup efforts have been nothing short of monumental. The confinement structure cost 1.5 billion euros, almost 1.7 billion, to build, and the entire project cost 2.2 billion euros, about 2.5 billion. Not to mention the staggering cost of the cleanup is estimated to be over 235 billion, an amount that could make anyone's head spin. But what led to the disastrous chain of events? Well, it all started with a routine safety test gone wrong, which exposed the reactor to unsafe conditions. Then, a combination of design flaws, human error, and a lack of safety measures led to the explosion and the subsequent radioactive fallout. You think that was disastrous? Wait until you hear about the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in Washington, USA, which collapsed just 4 months after its opening in 1940. Spanning 1,600 feet with a width of 39 feet, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge was a spectacular engineering project that was designed by Leon Moisseiff, a prominent bridge engineer. It was the world's 3rd longest suspension bridge at the time, and the first to use plate girder construction. Also, it connected Tacoma to Kitsap Peninsula, spanning over the Puget Sound. So far, this project sounds pretty darn impressive, yet it still went so wrong. It cost a total of $6.4 million, but tolls began at 55 cents and were reduced to 50 cents 2 months later when the debts were refinanced. Despite its impressive design and high cost, the bridge had problems from the very beginning. In fact, it earned the nickname Galloping Gertie because of the way it swayed in the wind. Also, Tacoma's unique design allowed it to be more flexible than other suspension bridges, but this flexibility turned out to be its downfall. On November 7, 1940, a steady 42-mile-per-hour wind was blowing through the Narrows when it suddenly caused the roadway to oscillate up and down with cars and trucks riding on it. The motion quickly became more severe, with the roadway rising and falling as much as 28 feet. Drivers and passengers were thrown from their cars, and some had to be rescued from the water below. Security officials immediately tried to stabilize the bridge, but it continued to sway violently for hours before the bridge's center finally collapsed, sending the entire roadway crashing into the water below. Fortunately, there were no fatalities, but the collapse was a major blow to the engineering community and a devastating loss for the people of Tacoma. It was a wake-up call for engineers worldwide, leading to new research into aeroelasticity and the design of more stable structures. The cause of the collapse was determined to be an aeroelastic flutter, a phenomenon that occurs when a structure's natural frequency matches the frequency of the wind and causes a structure to oscillate and, in extreme cases, collapse. Today, however, a new Tacoma Narrows Bridge stands in the place of the former, built with the lessons learned from the original's tragic collapse. It's a testament to the resilience of the engineering community and a reminder of the importance of learning from your past mistakes. Vehicles and people suspended on a swinging bridge might be high on your list of shocking fails. China's Lotus Riverside Complex in Shanghai gives Tacoma's super fail a run for its money. In fact, it made headlines around the world for this bizarre and frightening reason in 2009. Imagine waking up one morning to find your apartment building leaning at a precarious angle, threatening to collapse at any moment. That was the reality for the residents of the Lotus Riverside Complex, a luxury high-rise community on the banks of the Huangpu River. The Lotus Riverside Complex was a 13-building development, each 13 stories high with a unique circular design. and it was marketed as an upscale, eco-friendly community with amenities such as a swimming pool, fitness center, and private gardens. However, on June 27, 2009, one of the buildings suddenly tilted to a 15-degree angle, sparking widespread panic and evacuation efforts. The cause of the tilt was traced back to construction workers who had been excavating a basement garage from a neighboring building. They had been illegally dumping the soil they dug up on the banks of a nearby river, creating a soft foundation that couldn't support the weight of the Lotus Riverside complex, and the building's foundation slowly began to sink, causing it to lean dangerously to one side. The situation quickly became a race against time to stabilize the building and prevent a catastrophic collapse. Engineers worked around the clock, drilling holes in the ground and injecting cement to reinforce the foundation. They even used giant water tanks to tilt the building back into place. Thankfully, their efforts paid off, and the building was eventually stabilized. However, the incident led to the government cracking down on illegal construction practices and enforcing stricter building codes to prevent similar disasters from happening in the future. If it were you, would you willingly move back into that complex after the tilting building accident? I know I wouldn't. It seems collapsing builds are a common theme in the industry because the next super fail happens to be another one. We're talking about the tragic collapse of the Hyatt Regency Walkway in Kansas City, USA. On July 17, 1981, 2,000 people gathered in the hotel's atrium to attend a dance contest. It was supposed to be a fun and exciting evening, but it quickly turned into a nightmare. The Hyatt Regency was a newly constructed hotel with a unique design that featured 4 walkways suspended above the atrium. These walkways were connected by steel rods that were suspended from the ceiling, giving the impression that they were floating in mid-air. Unfortunately, the design turned out to be fatally flawed. During the dance contest, the walkway suddenly collapsed, sending hundreds of people plummeting to the ground below. The steel rods had been poorly designed and were unable to support the weight of the walkways and the people on them, so it led to the catastrophic death of 114 people with over 200 injured people. It was the deadliest non-natural disaster in Kansas City's history and sent shockwaves throughout the country. The tragedy was even worse because it could have been prevented if the engineers had done a better job. The original design needed steel rods to be one continuous piece, but the contractors decided to split them into 2 sections to make installation easier. This weakened the support structures of the walkways, making them much more susceptible to failure. In the months following the disaster, more than 300 lawsuits sought a cumulative total of $3 billion, equivalent to $8.94 billion in 2021, with about $140 million, equivalent to $417 million in 2021, awarded to victims and their families under hotel owner Crown Center Redevelopment Corporation. Today, the Hyatt Regency has been rebuilt, and the atrium has been redesigned to ensure that nothing like this can ever happen again. However, the memory of the tragedy lives on, serving as a reminder of the importance of proper engineering and construction practices. You're watching Innovative Builds because life's too short to watch boring builds. By hitting that subscribe button now and enabling notifications, this allows us to continue bringing incredible content directly to you. Now, back to the video. Finally, we have the most catastrophic and expensive engineering failure in the history of New Jersey. The Tropicana Casino Garage. In 2003, the Tropicana Casino and Resort in Atlantic City began constructing a new parking garage. The project was massive, with the garage set to hold over 2,400 cars and feature a pedestrian walkway connecting it to the main casino building. The $138 million project was intended to be a major expansion of the resort, helping to bring in even more visitors and revenue. Instead, it claimed the lives of 4 construction workers. This is because things quickly began to go wrong during construction as the garage started to tilt and sway, prompting concerns from workers and inspectors. Despite these warnings, construction continued, and the problem could only get worse, and on October 30th, 2003, the worst happened. The garage suddenly collapsed, sending tons of concrete and steel crashing down onto the workers below. 4 people were killed, and another 21 were injured, some of them critically. The collapse was the largest construction disaster in the history of New Jersey, and it was a wake-up call for the industry. An investigation into the collapse found that the garage had been poorly designed and constructed, with major flaws in the support structure. The contractor had also cut corners and ignored warnings from workers and inspectors, putting profits ahead of safety, and ultimately, the collapse cost over $100 million, including settlements with victims and their families. Before you leave, check out another insane video on the most useless mega projects of all time. From a bridge that leads nowhere to a city no one wants to live in, we'll uncover why these useless projects are so interesting and controversial. And if you haven't subscribed by now, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and put on notifications. We'll see you in the next video.